A heavy silence fell over the courtroom as 5-year-old Gabriel Silva entered, his small hand gripping the leash of his German shepherd, Rex. A long, faded scar ran down the dog's flank. Every eye in the room followed the boy's slow, determined steps toward the witness stand. Judge Carlos Mendez, a veteran of the bench with decades of experience, leaned forward, his gaze fixed on Gabriel, keenly aware that the fate of the case rested upon this fragile witness. Gabriel was the only one who had seen the face of the man who tried to abduct him, a man who could be locked away forever. But there was a profound problem. The boy had not spoken a single word since the attack. Across the room, the defendant, Ricardo Lima, a mild-mannered 45-year-old software engineer, sat calmly at the defense table. A witness had placed him at the scene, but without physical evidence or a confession, the case was thin. Ricardo's lawyer planned to discredit the traumatized child's ability to make a positive identification. Then, something unexpected happened. As Gabriel settled into the chair, his green eyes met Ricardo's. The boy's small fingers began to tremble, forming a subtle sign he had learned in therapy sessions. Only Rex and Judge Carlos noticed it. The dog reacted instantly to the faint gesture, a silent plea for help. Rex's body went rigid, his ears swiveling forward, his muscles coiling like a spring about to snap. A low, menacing growl rumbled from his chest, his golden eyes locked onto Ricardo with a chilling intensity that sent a ripple of unease through the courtroom. Murmurs and whispers spread through the gallery. This was not the trained reaction of a support animal. It was something deeper, something instinctual. Judge Carlos slammed his gavel, his voice unusually urgent, as he announced a 15-minute recess. The prosecutor, Juliana Costa, shot him a questioning look, but he averted his eyes, focusing on Gabriel, who was now clinging to Rex as if the dog were a lifeline. It was clear that something significant had just occurred, and the judge needed to understand it before the trial could proceed. Seated in his chambers, Judge Carlos replayed the moment in his mind. In all his years, he had never seen a therapy dog react with such raw certainty. He wondered what Rex had recognized, and what it meant for the case. In the hallway, Gabriel knelt beside Rex, his hands buried in the dog's thick fur. His mother, Mariana Silva, rushed to his side, her trembling fingers stroking his curls. "Are you okay, my love?" she asked softly. Gabriel didn't answer, but his grip on the dog tightened, a testament to the gravity of the moment. Standing a short distance away, investigator Lucas Ferreira, a seasoned agent from the public prosecutor's office, watched them. He was convinced the dog's reaction was a turning point. Approaching the judge, Lucas murmured, "I'd bet my badge that dog knows Ricardo from somewhere." Judge Carlos sighed, his blue eyes narrowing. He was determined to find out how. Meanwhile, in a private room, Ricardo Lima sat with his lawyer, Rafael Souza. The moment they were alone, Ricardo's arrogant confidence morphed into something colder, more calculating. His fingers drummed on the table as he replayed the scene. The boy hadn't spoken, but the dog had reacted. "He knows," Ricardo muttered to himself. Rafael simply raised an eyebrow, a small, knowing smirk on his lips. Ricardo realized with a jolt that the dog, something he had never even considered, could be the key to unraveling his entire defense. When the 15-minute recess ended, Judge Carlos straightened his robes and took a deep breath. He had never believed in coincidences. And in that moment, he was certain that Rex had just given them the most important clue of the trial. For the first time since the proceedings began, he felt the tide was turning, in spite of the silence. the solemnity of the court, and the terror that had stolen Gabriel's voice. Gabriel Silva had once been a boy full of life, a chatterbox who could light up any room with his stories and his bright, mischievous blue eyes. At 5, he loved fairy tales, stuffed animals, and the way his parents would use different voices for every character in his bedtime stories. But on one fateful day, fear had taken root and silenced him. It had been a perfect spring afternoon, the air thick with the scent of flowers as the sun warmed the backyard. Mariana watched from the kitchen window, smiling as Gabriel twirled in his favorite pink shirt, a little dancer lost in his own world. His father, Carlos Silva, would be home in a few hours, and she was debating whether to start dinner. Everything was normal, safe. Then the phone rang. It was Mariana's sister, calling from another city. She stepped inside for a quick, 4-minute conversation. When she returned to the yard, the small gate was wide open. A cold dread washed over her as she scanned the spot where Gabriel had been playing. The boy was still there, but he was not alone. A black van was parked at the curb, its side door ajar. A man knelt beside Gabriel, a sickeningly sweet smile on his face. "I've got puppies in the van," he was saying. "Special ones. They need a little boy to take care of them. Want to see?" Mariana's instincts fired before her mind could process the scene. "Gabriel!" she screamed. The man's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating glare. In a flash, he grabbed the boy's arm. Gabriel froze. He didn't scream, didn't fight. His eyes were wide, as if a profound fear had paralyzed him from the inside out. Across the street, a retired nurse named Renata Oliveira was walking her small dog and saw everything. Her voice, firm and weathered by age, cut through the air. "Hey! Get away from that child!" The man hesitated, loosening his grip for a split second, just long enough for Gabriel to wrench free and scramble toward his mother. Mariana swept him into her arms as the van sped away, tires squealing as they left black rubber marks on the pavement. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she held Gabriel tightly. He didn't cry or say a word. He just trembled, burrowing into her. Within minutes, the police arrived. Detective Jorge Ribeiro, an expert in child abduction cases, took charge. With his graying hair and tired brown eyes that had seen years of searching for missing children, he recognized the pattern immediately. "He fits the profile," Lucas Ferreira muttered, flipping through a worn notebook. 4 children had vanished in the last 18 months, all lured from near their homes with the promise of puppies. His partner, Agent Leticia Martins, knelt beside Gabriel. "Sweetheart," she asked gently, "do you remember what the man looked like?" Mariana stroked her son's hair with shaky hands. "You're safe now," she whispered. "Can you tell us about the man?" Gabriel only clutched her sweater tighter, his silence a solid wall. With fear in her voice, Mariana murmured, "He just won't talk anymore." Leticia and Lucas exchanged a worried glance. "It's selective mutism," Leticia said quietly. "A reaction to the trauma." Lucas sighed, rubbing his temple. The description was vague, just a man and a black van. But then Renata, the witness, stepped forward. "I wrote down part of the license plate," she said firmly. "The first letters were Y, K, K, Z." Lucas's eyes widened. It was the break they needed. Meanwhile, a growing despair settled over Gabriel. The once vibrant boy seemed to shrink into himself. In the days that followed, he stopped playing, stopped drawing, and refused to leave the house. His dreams became silent nightmares that disturbed his parents' sleep. Mariana and Carlos tried everything. Stories, his favorite foods, even the teddy bear he had loved so fiercely. But nothing worked. The son they knew was slipping away. One evening, as Mariana sat with Carlos in the kitchen, their eyes hollow with exhaustion, a therapist suggested they adopt a support animal. A therapy dog might help, she said calmly. Carlos ran a hand through his weary hair. Do you really think that will work? He asked. Despite their doubts, Mariana was willing to try anything. She had no idea how much that decision would change everything. Though he had lost his voice, that there was someone who could still understand Gabriel. And that someone was Rex. At Dr. Laura Barbosa's Animal Rehabilitation Center, the air smelled of disinfectant and the earthy scent of dog fur. The facility was quiet, save for the ticking of a clock and the occasional click of claws on the cool floor. On a large orthopedic bed near a window lay Rex, his brown eyes calmly observing every movement. He had been one of the city's finest police dogs, an animal whose instincts and training had saved countless lives. But he bore the scars of a great battle, including the deep gash on his right side, a permanent reminder of the night his career had ended. 3 years earlier, during an operation to rescue a kidnapped child, Rex had charged an armed suspect without hesitation. The attacker, trying to fend him off, had slashed the dog deeply with a knife meant for an officer. Even as blood matted his fur, Rex had subdued the man. In the months that followed, the injury never fully healed, and with limited resources, the department decided to retire him, even placing him on a list to be euthanized. That was when Dr. Laura intervened. With years of experience running a support animal program, she believed Rex's sharp instincts and unwavering loyalty were still invaluable. Now, she was ready to prove it. Mariana Silva sat nervously in a chair, her fingers twisting the fabric of her skirt, while Gabriel lingered behind her, peeking over her shoulder. The boy hadn't spoken since the incident, even after numerous therapy sessions. Dr. Laura knelt to Gabriel's level. Hi, Gabriel. My name is Laura, she said sweetly. I work with some very special dogs who help kids who've been through scary things. Gabriel said nothing, but his blue eyes shone as he looked at the large German shepherd a few feet away. Rex lay there, ears pricked, making no move to approach, simply offering his quiet presence. Would you like to meet him? Laura asked softly. Gabriel didn't respond, but he didn't run away either, which was a small victory. Mariana's voice was full of gentle encouragement. He's a good dog, honey. He used to be a police dog, like in your storybooks. Laura pointed to Rex and gave a quiet command. Stay. The dog remained perfectly still. You don't have to get close if you don't want to, she told Gabriel. Rex will stay here, but if you feel comfortable, you can hold out your hand, and he'll come to you. Gabriel hesitated for a long moment. Then slowly, he stepped out from behind his mother. His small fingers rose cautiously. Rex waited, attentive, for the final signal. When Laura nodded, Rex lowered his head and took careful steps forward until his warm breath ghosted over Gabriel's palm. In that instant, something shifted. The boy's fingers curled slightly, brushing against Rex's thick coat. Mariana gasped, covering her mouth. It was the first time Gabriel had willingly approached anyone or anything since the attack. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "My angel." Gabriel wrapped his arms around Rex's neck, clinging to him as if the dog were the only steady thing in a world that had suddenly become terrifying. Laura smiled. Very good, Gabriel. Rex likes you. Though he still didn't speak, the boy would not let go of the dog. In the weeks that followed, Rex and Gabriel became inseparable. Gabriel would spend hours by the dog's side, his small fingers tracing the scar that marked his flank. When nightmares woke him in the night, the steady beat of Rex's heart would calm him. And though he remained silent, the boy began to draw again. Simple sketches of a boy and his dog, standing together against shadowy figures. One afternoon, in Dr. Laura's office, Gabriel was watching Rex perform a simple trick when he whispered, "Good boy." His voice was so soft that for a moment, Mariana thought she had imagined it. But when she looked at Gabriel, he was staring at Rex, his lips parted in surprise, as if he had startled even himself. Tears streamed down Mariana's face. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Laura placed a hand gently on Mariana's arm. "Sometimes," she murmured, "trust is the first step to finding your voice again." Mariana squeezed the therapist's hand. "Then we'll follow where that trust leads us," she said. "Even if it's to a place we never imagined. A courtroom, where the real monster will be exposed." Back inside the courtroom, the tension was almost palpable. The gallery was packed with journalists, families, and onlookers, all eager to witness one of the most significant trials in recent memory. At the center of the room, Ricardo Lima sat beside his lawyer, his expression unreadable, strangely calm despite the gravity of the accusations. His fingers tapped a rhythmic, steady beat on the defense table. Beside the witness stand, Gabriel held Rex's leash in a white-knuckled grip, his anchor in a sea of strange faces. Rex stood alert at the boy's side, his ears pricked and his intelligent brown eyes fixed on Ricardo, his nose occasionally twitching as if picking up a familiar, unwelcome scent. "All rise," the bailiff announced, as Judge Carlos Mendez entered, his black robes sweeping behind him. After taking his seat on the bench, the judge surveyed the courtroom with a discerning gaze, his eyes briefly passing over Gabriel and Rex. He had already decided the therapy dog would stay, though he knew the decision would not please everyone. "Before we proceed with opening statements," Judge Carlos began, his voice firm and measured, "the court will hear arguments regarding the presence of the support animal." Ricardo's attorney, Rafael Souza, rose politely, adjusted his tie, and addressed the bench. "Your Honor, we understand the importance of emotional support, but the presence of this large German shepherd could elicit an emotional bias from the jury, thereby prejudicing my client's defense. We request that the dog be removed during testimony." Prosecutor Juliana Costa was immediately on her feet. "Your Honor, Gabriel Silva is 5 years old. He is a victim of trauma, diagnosed with selective mutism following his ordeal. Rex is not here as a spectacle, but as a necessary support to allow Gabriel to participate without suffering further trauma." Judge Carlos Mendez leaned back, his expression unreadable. "I have reviewed the reports from the child psychologist and the animal behavior specialist. Rex remains." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, a mix of agreement and discontent. Raphael pursed his lips, unsatisfied but unwilling to press the matter. He returned to his seat, casting a glance at Ricardo, who remained inexplicably impassive. Soon the trial commenced. The prosecutor painted a chilling portrait of Ricardo Lima's actions, a history of manipulation, deception, and predatory behavior that spanned years. Several witnesses were heard, including the elderly neighbor, Renata Oliveira, who recounted in a trembling voice how she saw Ricardo trying to lure Gabriel into his van, grabbing the boy's arm before he managed to flee. When it was his turn, Gabriel sat silently in a large wooden chair. His small fingers tightened on the leash whenever the tension in the room rose, seeking comfort in Rex's steady gaze. Then, the time came for Gabriel to testify. A profound silence fell over the court as his mother, Mariana, led him to the witness stand, staying close by, her look protective, her heart aching with the wish that she could spirit him away from it all. Juliana Costa approached slowly. "Hi, Gabriel," she said softly. "I know this is hard, but remember you can just nod if that feels more comfortable. If you need a moment, just let us know." Gabriel kept his eyes fixed on the table, his breathing shallow. Then, as if sensing his distress, Rex leaned lightly against his leg. The boy's hand drifted down, his fingers slowly clenching a fistful of Rex's fur. With an almost imperceptible movement, Gabriel nodded. "Very good," Juliana said, her tone gentle. "Gabriel, can you tell us who was with you in your yard that day?" After a long silence, the boy lifted his arm and pointed directly at Ricardo Lima. Though the defendant's expression didn't change for a fleeting instant, his lips tightened. Raphael was instantly on his feet, objecting that the boy had seen images of the defendant multiple times before the trial, making his identification unreliable. Judge Carlos waved a hand, ruling it was for the jury to weigh the witness's credibility. Juliana continued. "Gabriel, did the man speak to you that day?" Instead of answering, the boy made a small gesture with his hand, the same subtle signal Rex had recognized before. In a flash, Rex's ears perked up, his muscles tensed, and a deep, warning growl echoed through the silent courtroom. It wasn't aggression, but a clear warning. The reaction stunned the court. Even Judge Carlos leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Raphael stood again, this time with more urgency. "Your Honor, I object. This is pure theatrics." But the judge's attention was fixed on Rex, who now stood perfectly still, his focus locked on Ricardo, as if he had caught a scent only he could recognize. It was the same instinctive reaction Gabriel had shown moments before. The judge turned his gaze to Juliana. "Has this dog had any prior contact with the defendant?" Juliana hesitated before answering. "Not to my knowledge, Your Honor." Judge Carlos then addressed the defense table. "Mr. Lima, have you ever encountered this dog before?" For the first time, Ricardo's composure faltered. His fingers clenched into a fist. He said nothing. Moments later, Juliana's eyes widened as she whispered something to her colleague. A member of the prosecution team quickly exited the courtroom. "What is happening?" Raphael demanded impatiently. Maintaining her composure, Juliana requested a brief recess, stating that new, relevant evidence had come to light. Judge Carlos studied the scene for a long moment, before granting a 15-minute break. As the courtroom slowly emptied, whispers multiplied in the hallways. Had Rex recognized Ricardo? And if so, from where? Judge Carlos was convinced the answer would change everything. The pressure on the prosecution mounted as new leads emerged. Ricardo Lima was now officially linked to several disappearances, but without Gabriel's full testimony, the trial teetered on the brink of uncertainty. What no one expected was that the key to unlocking the case would come not from the boy, but from the German shepherd who never left his side. The next morning, in the crisp autumn air, the prosecution team, led by Juliana, filed a motion to introduce new forensic evidence. Soil samples collected from Ricardo's van had been analyzed, pointing to a very specific location. a derelict cabin in a remote rural area. Detective Lucas Ferreira, with decades of experience in similar cases, immediately understood the significance of the lead. Your Honor, Juliana began, we request a 24-hour recess to pursue this crucial lead. We believe this evidence may be the final piece needed to solve this case. Rafael, the defense attorney, promptly objected, arguing it was an unnecessary delay. His client had been exhaustively interrogated, he claimed, and the soil samples were circumstantial at best. Judge Carlos, with a stern look, overruled the objection and granted the request, declaring a 24-hour recess. Court is adjourned, he stated. The moment the gavel fell, Detective Lucas and his team were on their way. Rex, ever watchful and protective of Gabriel, accompanied them on the operation, having made it clear he sensed something the humans had missed. By early afternoon, the team arrived at the abandoned cabin. The place was eerily silent, the only sound the wind whispering through the trees. A thick layer of dust covered the porch, but faint footprints led to the back door, suggesting recent activity. Rex was the first to react. As soon as they arrived, his ears shot up, his nose twitched intently, and his body went rigid, tail high, muscles coiled as if ready to pounce. He let out a low growl and began circling the entrance. This place doesn't feel right, Lucas muttered. Rex knows something's wrong. The team advanced cautiously, weapons drawn. Inside, the cabin was sparse. A table, a folding bed, and a few empty food cans stacked in a corner. Then, Lucas noticed something odd. Near the back wall, the wooden floorboards had an unusual seam, a slight, misplaced depression. Tapping it lightly, he said, "There's something under here." With precision, the officers pried up a loose plank, revealing a narrow step leading down into a hidden cellar. The air grew cold and damp as they descended. The dim light revealed a horrific scene. Children's belongings, old toys, tiny shoes, a faded pink backpack, and, in a far corner, a little girl. She was chained, but she was alive. Mariana, 8 years old, had been missing for 6 months. Her pale face and tattered clothes stood in stark contrast to the sheer relief flooding her eyes as she saw the officers. In a hoarse voice, she whispered, "Help me." Rex reacted instantly, pulling at his leash and whining as if he understood all the suffering the child had endured. Lucas rushed to free her, unfastening the chains and scooping her into his arms. "You're safe now," he assured her. "We're here to help." Mariana clung to Lucas, trembling, as the rescue seemed to finally bring her nightmare to an end. But the battle was not over. Back in court, news of Mariana's rescue spread like wildfire, filling the room with reporters and family members. Juliana, ready for her final charge against Ricardo, presented the new evidence: Mariana's testimony and the soil samples linking his van to the scene. "Mr. Lima," Juliana declared, her voice ringing with conviction, "how do you explain the presence of a kidnapped child, locked in a cellar, on a property directly linked to you?" For the first time, Ricardo Lima showed genuine panic, stammering, I don't know what you're talking about." Juliana pressed on. "Your DNA was found on the chains. The tire tracks from your van match those at the scene. And most importantly, Mariana is alive, and she can testify against you." Her words fell like hammer blows. A single survivor, capable of demolishing his entire defense. Ricardo's carefully constructed composure began to crumble as his attorney whispered furiously in his ear, Then, once more, Rex, who stood near Gabriel, lifted his head. His eyes narrowed as he stared at Ricardo. His hackles rose, and a deep growl rumbled through the room. The court fell silent as the German shepherd took slow, deliberate steps forward, his gaze fixed on the defendant as if recognizing something no one else could see. Ricardo began to tremble. Everyone saw it. The man who had maintained an arrogant facade throughout the trial began to sweat, his hands gripping the table. In a barely audible whisper, he said, "I want to change my plea." Gasps erupted across the courtroom as Judge Carlos fixed Ricardo with a severe glare. "Mr. Lima, are you saying you wish to plead guilty?" The entire room held its breath. Trembling, Ricardo answered, "Yes." The sudden end to the trial shocked everyone. Ricardo Lima was sentenced to life in prison, without the possibility of parole, sealing the fate of a man who had spread terror for so long. But the true heroes of the case weren't the lawyers or the investigators. It was a 5-year-old boy who found his courage, and the dog who never gave up on him. In the days following the sentencing, Gabriel spoke his first words in weeks. Cradling Rex's face in his small hands, he whispered, "Thank you." His parents wept, relieved to see their son beginning to find his way back. And as Rex wagged his tail, nuzzling affectionately against Gabriel, it was clear that some bonds are truly unbreakable. No matter how dark the world may seem, there will always be those willing to face the darkness, even if they walk on 4 paws.